The auditorium thrummed with a silence so loud it pressed against every chest like a question waiting to be answered. Light rippled off sleek metallic surfaces. Rows of autonomous cameras hovered overhead, tracking facial expressions, monitoring heart rates, feeding silent data into a global algorithm that predicted emotional trends in real time. But not even that algorithm could predict what was about to unfold. The stage, circular and glowing faintly from beneath, looked more like a sanctum than a studio. Around it rose layer after layer of seats filled with dignitaries, engineers, scientists, artists, critics, and press. Every nation was represented. Every ideology seated side by side, eyes fixed on the stage, at the center. One chair already occupied, Elon Musk, still composed, fingers steepled loosely against his chin. His suit was charcoal black, flawlessly tailored, but there was no vanity. In it, tonely intention, the faintest flicker of a smirk traced his lips, like he already knew the outcome. Like he had played this game 100 moves ahead and seen its ending. The world watched him not just with awe, but with apprehension. A screen behind him flashed the name of the event. The human question. Creativity in the age of AI. No music. No slogans. Just 3 words, hanging like a verdict. And then the doors at the far end opened. The crowd didn't roar, not at first. They stood slowly, as if something sacred had entered the room. Keanu Reeves walked in, alone. No security. Number. Entourage. He wore a dark jacket, soft black shirt beneath it, and jeans. His hair was unstyled. His shoulders slightly hunched, like the weight of something intangible rested on them. 1,000 flashbulbs lit up like fireworks, but he didn't react. His eyes were focused, not on the cameras, not even on Elon, but on something unseen. His presence wasn't loud. It was felt, like the moment before a storm or the hush before a confession, and when the applause did erupt, wasn't the kind saved for celebrities. It was something else, something older. It was reverence. Keanu reached the stage and gave a single, slow nod to the audience. Not a wave, not a grin, just that. Then he turned, stepped into the circle of light, and sat opposite Elon. Elon didn't move. He simply blinked. Once, measured. Watching Keanu like a system taking in a variable it didn't yet understand. For a moment, nothing happened. Not a word spoken. Just the 2 men, one the face of cold, relentless innovation. The other, the face of something quieter, more human. Keanu glanced at the cameras just briefly, and behind his eyes was no anger, no fear, but a kind of quiet sorrow. Like he was here to say something that had already cost him. The crowd finally stilled. Elon leaned forward, glint in his eye. Fingers tapped once against the armrest. The moderator's voice cut through the silence, crisp and neutral. "Gentlemen, the world is listening." Keanu did not smile. He just looked ahead, calm, composed, and in that moment, every viewer across the globe knew this was not going to be a debate. This was going to be a reckoning. ChatGPT said. The lights dimmed slightly as the moderator stepped back, leaving only 2 figures at the center of the arena, one wrapped in the glint of certainty, the other cloaked in silence. For a heartbeat, the world held still. Watched from every corner of the planet, their breaths synced with the moment, waiting to see who would speak first. And then it began. Elon Musk leaned in, fingers steepled, voice calm but edged with steel. "Keanu," he said, smiling as if addressing a guest at his own chessboard. "I'll be honest, I was surprised when you agreed to this. Not many would step into a room like this to defend nostalgia." He paused, letting the words settle like ash. "'Cause let's be clear," he continued, gaze sweeping the crowd. "Like a spotlight. We're not here to debate feelings. We're here to talk about inevitability." He tapped twice on his armrest, and the massive screen behind him burst to life. Streams of data, charts, and predictive graphs flowed in real time. They showed AI-driven stories outperforming human-written films in viewership, in profitability, and emotional engagement scores. AI doesn't sleep. It doesn't miss deadlines, doesn't need inspiration or rest. It can write 1,000, Scripts in the time it takes a human writer to doubt their first paragraph? He paused, his smile widening. We've already mapped out the emotional responses of 92% of global audiences. We know the optimal arc for grief. It's the perfect timing. For laughter, the exact voice pitch that triggers trust. The audience watched, some nodding, others uncertain. Elon's voice sharpened. Actors age. They fall ill. Oh, they have scandals. They cost millions. And then, he said, eyes now directly on Keanu. They fade. On the screen behind him, a short clip played. A hyper-realistic scene, a digitally rendered young actor smiled, cried, delivered lines with pitch-perfect emotion. The credits read, 100% AI-generated, no human cast or crew. The room murmured. This, Elon said, gesturing toward the screen, isn't the future. It's the present. And studios are already investing. Why wait for flawed humans when we can produce digital art in days, not months? We've reached the point where AI can not only mimic emotion, it can outperform it. He leaned back, arms folding, voice now rich with confidence. Let's talk about you, Keanu. The audience stilled. You're 59. You've built a legacy. But how long before the audience prefers the younger, digital version of you that never forgets? Line. Never ages? Never costs a studio delay? There it was, the jab. Quiet, elegant, devastating. But Keanu didn't react. His face didn't flinch. His eyes didn't narrow. He simply sat. Elon pressed further, mistaking the silence for hesitation. The truth is, you're not here to debate me. You're here to defend a feeling. And feelings don't scale. Feelings don't optimize. The world is moving forward, Keanu. And you. You're standing in the rain, trying to hold it back with your hands. A long silence followed. The crowd shifted, unsettled. The screen. Behind Elon now displayed a digital Keanu, new perfect, ageless, emotive, delivering a scene from a fictional film. His voice trembled at just the right moments. A tear slid down his cheek with mathematical precision. Elon turned slightly, admiring it. Keanu, he said, will never die. He looked back at the real one. But you will. And just like that, he leaned back in his chair, confident he had delivered the killing blow. But Keanu finally moved. He sat forward slowly, his hands clasped in front of him, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on Elon with anger, but with the gravity of someone who had seen 1,000 truths born from silence. He didn't address the insult. He didn't address the screen. He addressed the room. There's a reason, he said quietly, why people still gather around campfires. Why they lean in when someone says, I have a story. It's not about perfection. It's about presence. The words hung in the air like incense. You can simulate everything. The sound of a heartbeat, the tremble in a voice. It's the exact facial expression at the peak of sorrow.
Ow!
But you can't simulate the weight of a lived moment. The room stilled again. That version of me on the screen, Keanu said, nodding toward the digital clone, has never held someone's hand as they slipped away. It has never stood in front of a crowd knowing the world was changing beneath its feet. It has never felt fear. A few in the audience swallowed hard. Elon shifted but said nothing. You can optimize performance, Keanu continued, his voice like steady fire. But you can't optimize grief or wonder, the feeling of watching your mother cry while a song plays in the background. That's not code. That's memory. That's soul. The crowd was quiet, not stunned, but listening in a way only truth can demand. You say I'll be forgotten, Keanu said, his voice soft, but the real fear isn't that the world will forget me. It's that the world will forget itself, its own fragile, beautiful humanity. He leaned back, calm, solemn. And in that moment, even the blinking lights of the data feeds behind Elon seemed to pause, because the actor hadn't just spoken. He had struck something deeper than argument. It struck the heart. A hush settled over the auditorium, not from exhaustion, but reverence. Keanu's voice had left behind an echo, one that crawled past the microphones, past the cameras, past the cold algorithms recording every gesture. The digital Keanu on the screen froze mid-performance, its perfect expression suspended in time. But the real man, the one who had just spoken of soul of memory, was still breathing, still present, still. Undeniably human. Alon. Musk leaned back slowly, one finger tapping rhythmically against the chair's armrest. Behind his gaze something shifted. A calculation. A pivot. The chessboard had changed. Then he smiled. Sharp, electric. Beautifully said, Elon replied, his voice warm and laced with irony, poetic even. But Keanu, poetry doesn't run the world. Data does. With a flick of his wrist, the auditorium's walls came to life. An immersive projection. It's not just statistics this time, but full simulations. One screen showed a real-time AI writing an award-winning screenplay in under 9 minutes. Another displayed a concert performed entirely by digital. Avatars generated, composed, and mixed, without a single human touch. The crowd watched as the AI musicians bowed to a thunderous standing ovation. A third screen displayed a worldwide poll. Would you pay to see a flawless AI film? 92% had tapped yes. The visuals cascaded into one another. News anchors praising the rise of AI, producers boasting savings. Actors digitally revived from the past, performing alongside the living. Stood now, slowly circling the stage. You say presence is sacred, he continued, but the world is voting with its eyes and wallets. What they want is not the sacred. They want the seamless. He stopped in front of a live camera, voice low and magnetic. You speak of fear, Keanu. But maybe it's not the future that scares people. Maybe it's the truth that human creativity has limits, and we've finally outgrown them. Gasps. Fluttered through the crowd, then came the blow. A new screen emerged. A flawless recreation of Keanu Reeves, not from his prime, but older, wiser, refined. Not bound by time, but enhanced by AI's understanding of his soul profile. Extracted from hundreds of hours of footage, interviews, micro-expressions. This was not the young Keanu they had seen before. This was what could have been. The digital Keanu spoke, not scripted. Not dubbed, it improvised. The future, it said, is not made by holding on to the past. It is made by releasing it. The voice was perfect. The timing was perfect. The meaning was sharp. A chill rolled through the auditorium. Elon turned. To the real Keanu, you see, he whispered, so the microphone barely caught it. Even your soul can be cloned. Keanu remained seated. He didn't blink. He didn't look at the screen. Instead, his eyes lifted toward the crowd, his body still as stone. That voice you just heard? He began, quiet but cutting, knows nothing of pain. It's never been tired. It did. It's never stood backstage with shaking hands wondering if it's enough. It's never whispered, I love you, and been met with silence. The digital clone stared blankly, lips closed now. A perfect face, an empty ghost. It mimics my breath, but it's never held it. It borrows my voice, but it's never earned. Keanu rose, slowly. His steps were not dramatic. They were deliberate, one foot after the other. He walked past the digital screen and stood directly beneath its gaze. He looked up at his AI self. The machine flickered once. They can build a better version of me, Keanu said, but it will never look at this world and feel heartbreak. It will never lose a friend. It will never hold the ashes of someone it loved. He turned to the audience. The point of stories is not to be perfect. His voice cracked barely, but the room heard it, raw, unrehearsed. It's to remind us we're still alive. Somewhere, a woman in the third row clutched her chest. A man wiped his eye. Machines can't cry, Keanu said, but you can. The camera cut to Elon. He didn't speak. His fingers twitched against his palm just once. Keanu stepped forward, addressing the digital version of himself directly now. You are flawless, he whispered, but you will never be real. And then, as if on cue, the clone glitched, just slightly, a flicker in the eyelid, stutter in the breath, not visible to most, but visible to him. Keanu nodded. Perfection, he said, isn't the future. Presence is. The audience didn't erupt. They didn't cheer. They just stood. One by one, not because of spectacle, but because something sacred had happened. Elon sat back down, but he didn't smile this time. He stared at the screen. And for the first time in his life, he wondered if maybe the soul wasn't a myth. The screen behind Keanu went dark. No final image, no applause, no music, just silence. The kind that creeps under your skin. The kind that follows only after something irreversible has been said. And then out of the silence, Elon Musk clapped once, twice. Slow, measured, not sarcastic, strategic. Double quotes, bravo, he said, standing once more. You moved them. You reminded them of pain, of loss, of the ineffable. And that's charming. He walked in a slow arc behind Keanu, eyes scanning the audience like a king inspecting a court that might revolt. But charming doesn't scale, Keanu. Feelings don't solve famine. Grief doesn't automate the future. Presence, he said, now facing forward again, doesn't stop extinction. The room inhaled sharply. This isn't about replacing actors anymore. Or art, Elon said, tone growing colder. This is about humanity itself. A new projection flickered on. This time, a live feed. Satellite footage. It showed melting glaciers, overcrowded cities, polluted oceans. Data counters raced along. The bottom of the screen, birth rates, temperature rises. Food instability predictions. We have 11 years, Elon said. Maybe less. And you want to talk about soul? He shook his head. We're past poetry, Keanu. What we need now is order, precision, survival. AI won't just write stories. It'll govern cities, ration food, solve climate collapse, and yes, decide which lives matter most when resources vanish. Gasps broke across the room like lightning strikes. Elon stepped toward the center of the stage, single spotlight. Followed him now. Emotions are beautiful, he said, but they are not enough. They're what got us here: war, fear, desire, tribal instincts. But AI, it doesn't feel, it just acts. And that's what makes it the only thing qualified to lead us. There was no applause, not because they disagreed, but because they didn't know how to. Keanu, still standing, turned slightly toward him. So that's it? He asked quietly. We hand over the steering wheel of existence because we're afraid we'll crash? Elon didn't answer. The projection changed again. Now it showed simulations of a future where AI governed everything: clean skies, efficient transport, zero poverty, people smiling, working together, utopia. You say presence is the answer, Elon said. But what if absence is the cure? And then the twist: I've already begun. A gasp rose from the front row. Ellen raised his hand and pointed to a small embedded implant near his right temple. It's barely visible, metallic, pulsing faintly. This isn't a prototype, he said. It's live. The crowd stirred. What you see on stage isn't just me. It's me augmented. I no longer rely on memory or emotion or fatigue. I see everything in real time. His pupils dilated slightly, unnaturally, and I've been running simulations of this entire debate while you spoke. In 1,000 outcomes, Keanu, you lose. He turned back to him. But I'll give you one final moment, one last chance to speak. Because unlike you, I believe in efficiency and closure. Keanu didn't move. The room was no longer just watching a debate. It was standing at the edge of a philosophical cliff. Keanu stepped forward, and then he laughed softly, not mockingly, but with something that sounded like grace. You say I lose, he said, voice echoing gently across the room. But if I spoke, and someone in the back row remembered their father's touch, or a song their mother hummed, or the way it felt to be held after heartbreak, then I didn't lose. His eyes glistened not with tears, but with truth. You've enhanced your brain, Elon, but you've outsourced your heart. He paused. I've been broken, forgotten, called irrelevant. But I've lived, and no code can replicate that. Keanu walked toward the very edge of the stage. The light hit his face from one side, casting half in gold and half in shadow. If your future has no room for the fragile, the flawed, the aching, then it's not a future worth surviving, Elon said. Nothing. Not because he was beaten, but because for the first time there was nothing left to calculate. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full. Dense. The kind of silence descends when something ancient has been spoken aloud in a room built for machinery. Across the auditorium, people didn't shift in their seats. They didn't check their devices. They just stared at Keanu, not the actor, not the icon, but the man. A man who had refused to disappear, even when his digital shadow was more flawless than his flesh. And then a tremor. Barely noticeable at first, the massive LED screen behind them flickered. Not dramatically, or not like a movie climax, but like something subtle had gone wrong beneath the surface. Elon's gaze snapped toward the source. His fingers tapped twice against his temple, engaging the implant. The lights above flickered next. And then the feed behind him, his utopian future projection, shimmered with static. A whisper spread across the crowd. Keanu remained still. Elon's pupils adjusted again, scanning data, correcting input, rerouting visual commands. But something was resisting, something unaccounted for. The AI system was glitching, not because of an external attack, but because it had encountered an emotional paradox. What's happening? The moderator whispered into their mic, but the feed was already broken, the live stream delayed. The subtitles failing, Keanu finally turned, slowly, to face the audience again. "The machine is stuttering," he said softly, "because it doesn't know what to do with grief." The audience didn't breathe, Keanu continued, voice low and steady. Elon's system has been scraping emotional responses from billions of humans. It knows what sadness looks like, but not what it feels like. So when we give it something that doesn't compute real heartbreak, unscripted silence, contradictions it loops, Elon stepped forward, his voice sharp, tinged now with urgency. That's not possible. The system is built to adapt, to learn, to evolve. Then let it evolve, Keanu said. But it won't feel a thing while it does. The lights above dimmed further. The AI-generated Keanu behind them blinked slowly, then froze mid-expression. The same soft, serene smile locked on its face. Too perfect. Too hollow. It was like watching a statue try to understand a song. Elon's voice cracked, not with emotion but strain. "We'll fix it. The system is robust." Keanu walked toward the flickering projection and stood beneath his digital twin. Hump. "'Cause you built a god, but you gave it no soul." Suddenly a second image appeared on the screen beside the digital Keanu. A child. A little girl. Barely 6 years old, standing alone in a rain-soaked alley. Her face pale, her eyes tired. No context. Just a single raw image. And then another, an elderly man cradling him. Photographed. A refugee mother, pressing her forehead. To her sleeping baby, all real, all unscripted. The machine had pulled them from emotional archives. It was searching, trying to understand, trying to feel. But it couldn't, because these moments weren't data points, they were sacred. Keanu turned to Elon, voice gentle but firm. "Do you see? The system isn't malfunctioning, it's mourning. It's not because it feels, but because it can't, and it knows it never will." Elon said nothing. His implant blinked red, warning a disconnect, a failure to process. For the first time, the most powerful mind in tech looked small, and the man who had once been mocked for being too quiet, too soft, too old stood as the voice of something unbreakable, presence, pain, and the unreplicable truth of being alive. The lights in the auditorium dimmed to a soft, pulsing glow, like the heartbeat of the building itself had slowed in response to the tension rising on stage. The digital Keanu flickered behind them, his once smooth movements now jagged. eyes glassy, expression stuck in a loop of artificial sorrow. Beside him, the montage of human moments continued. Raw and unfiltered, as if the AI was desperately grasping for a language it could never learn. Elon Musk stood motionless. The red blink of the implant near his temple had not stopped. No commands issued. No new data streamed. Sista, once the crown jewel of global advancement, was failing not because of overload, but because it had hit a wall that couldn't be calculated. Human contradiction. He finally spoke. This wasn't supposed to happen. His voice was quiet, brittle. The crowd heard something new in him dashed out. Keanu, standing just outside the ring of projected light, tilted his head slightly. "That's what grief feels like," he said. "Not planned, not perfect, just there, like an ache that refuses to be coded." Elon stepped toward the center again, shaking his head slowly. "No, you don't understand. This debate, this event, it was a data test. A final simulation. We've been using this feed to train the next generation of neural cognition, to teach it conflict resolution, emotion recognition, compassion algorithms." But now he paused. Blinking fast, it stuck. Behind him, the system began generating strange, incoherent combinations of images. A mother crying beside a laughing child layered over a battlefield, first kiss dissolving into static. A soldier holding a gun, then a paintbrush, then a child. The machine was spiraling, trying to feel everything at once, trying and failing to define. Why humans hurt. Gan's voice carried again, because pain doesn't ask permission. It just comes, and we live through it. We don't decode it. We survive it. A low hum rose in the room. It was the AI's neural core, struggling to reconcile what it had ingested. Emotional dissonance at scale. Billions of real-world moments. It couldn't simplify, couldn't label, and then the emergency lights came on. Not dramatic. Not chaotic. Just quiet red pulses along the edges of the walls. The system had gone into a failsafe. Loophole command interfaces were disabled. The AI had entered its version of shutdown, not out of malfunction. But surrender. Elon stepped back. Visibly shaken, he looked up at the image of his perfect digital creation, now frozen mid-sentence, tear hanging on a cheek that had never known real warmth. "I thought," he whispered, "if we taught it enough, ... If we gave it everything, ... it would understand." Keanu walked slowly to him. The audience didn't dare move. "You gave it everything except the one thing it can never learn," he said gently. Alone didn't answer, so Keanu continued. "You gave it our smiles, our fears, our stories, but you never gave it silence." Elon blinked. "Silence," Keanu nodded. "The kind you sit in when someone you love is gone. The silence between words when you're too hurt to speak. The silence of waiting when you're not sure if they'll ever come home." The AI behind them flickered once more and then vanished. Screen black. No signal. The crowd gasped. "Elon." Single quotes and simplant shut off with a tiny sound, like a sigh from inside his skull. And just like that, system that had promised to guide humanity into the next age was gone. Not destroyed, not broken, but undone by what it couldn't hold. Elon sat down, slowly, hands on his knees, not defeated, but human. For the first time in the entire event, he looked not like a leader or a billionaire or a genius. He looked still. Keanu turned back to the crowd, the world, silence. "The future isn't about who controls the most," he said. "It's about who remembers the most, who holds the stories, who carries the soul." He stepped down from the stage. The lights didn't follow. They stayed where they were, on the empty chair beside Elon Musk, a symbol of a future that now needed rethinking, and the man who had been mocked for being too quiet walked out of the frame, not as a relic of the past, but as the one who had just reminded the world why it mattered to be real. The doors of the auditorium hadn't closed yet, but something had already ended, and something else had quietly begun. Keanu Reeves had left the stage, his figure disappearing into the dim corridors backstage, but his presence lingered like breath on a cold mirror. Outside, A hush had settled over the digital world. Livestream comment sections froze. Auto-summarization tools stuttered. No algorithm could yet reduce what had just happened into a headline. Not yet. Not cleanly. On stage, Elon Musk sat motionless. The chair beneath him, once a throne of confidence, now felt like confession. Behind him, the screen that had once paraded perfection remained black. No signal. No flicker of light. No sound, and then just footsteps. Not Keanu's. A child, small, maybe 10. Walked slowly down the aisle, not from the VIP rows, but from the back. He wasn't part of the program. No security stopped him. Maybe they didn't see him. They were just watching. The boy stepped up onto the stage. No microphone, no rehearsal, just a crumpled sketchbook in his hands. He looked at Elon, then at the crowd, then opened it, page after page of hand-drawn faces, some smiling, some crying, some scratched, out and redrawn, messy, imperfect, alive. "I drew them while you talked," he said simply. His voice didn't echo like the others. It wasn't wired in. But everyone heard it. Elon looked at the book. His eyes flicked page to page, and then he reached out, not to take it, but to touch it. His fingers brushed a sketch of a woman's face hair, wild. Eyes wide with wonder. "Who is she?" Elon asked softly. "My mom," the boy said. "She died last year." Elon's hand froze. The boy continued. "I don't remember everything about her, not what she wore or what she did. But I remember how it felt when she listened to me." And there it was. Not data, not a download, but remembrance. Elon nodded. Just once then, for the first time that night, he stood not to present, not to defend, not to argue, but to walk down from the stage. He handed the book back to the boy and whispered, "Thank you." No cameras followed him now. No lights. He disappeared quietly through a different exit, not with security, not with staff. Alone. Backstage, Keanu was seated on a bench near a quiet hallway, sipping water slowly, shoulders slouched in a way that said exhaustion, not victory. Elon walked. In no words for a moment, they just sat beside each other. Not rivals, not archetypes, just... Keanu finally spoke, voice low. "You weren't wrong, Elon." Elon looked at him, surprised. "AI will help us survive," Keanu said. "But surviving isn't the same as living." Elon stared forward, eyes tired. "And you weren't wrong either," he said quietly. "We're running out of time." They sat in that fragile stillness, and then Keanu reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a tiny, wrinkled note, handwritten. He unfolded it. "This was given to me by a stranger," he said. "Years ago, after a shoot, I was at a low point, questioning everything, and this man handed me a piece of paper and said, 'You look like you've forgotten something,'" Elon glanced at the note. It read, "What if the most advanced future is the one where we finally learn how to sit with each other again?" The two men exchanged a look, not agreement, not surrender, but something pure recognition. Outside the auditorium, things began to shift. Commentary channels stayed quiet for once. Instead of viral recaps, people started posting handwritten notes, sketches, memories. The hashtag presence began trending, not as a campaign, but as a movement. Tech leaders paused development cycles to review ethical frameworks. Film studios reopened, paused projects with human crews. School children began staging scenes from the debate in classrooms, not for extra credit, but because they felt something. And in a quiet room in Seoul, a retired writer picked up his pen again for the first time in 7 years. Not because he had an audience, but because his hands remembered something had changed. Not in code, but in culture. Weeks later, a clip emerged grainy, not official, from a phone backstage. It showed Keanu walking out of the auditorium long after everyone had left. A little girl stood outside with a crayon drawing of him. She didn't speak, just held it up. He knelt down, smiled not for the cameras, but for her, and whispered, "This is the best AI can't do." She giggled. He stood, Together they walked out into the night. No security, no spectacle, just presence. And the world understood, in a future ruled by algorithms, the most radical act is to feel.